Hey everyone, it's Tim from timgagnon.com, and I have another tips and tricks video for you this week. I want to talk about finding relationships in your reference photo and how to get accurate proportions with your initial sketch. A lot of times when I look at paintings that are sent in for critique or just an evaluation, I notice proportions are off, or when I do a workshop and I tell people to paint a tree, we've got a reference photo, the proportions are off. It's either too shrunk or too tall. Actually, too tall is a lot of times okay. Sometimes if things are stretched a little bit, they work a little bit better than being shrunk. But I'll talk about that in another video. But what I want to talk about today is how I approach doing an initial sketch. I don't always do a sketch, but if I do, there's certain things I do to try to measure my photo to get my proportions accurate. And that might kind of sound confusing, but as we go along here, it'll make sense. First thing I want to do is show you my setup. I have got an 11 by 14 inch canvas here, and what I like to do is when I'm working with a reference photo is crop that image to 11 by 14. Just makes it a whole heck of a lot easier to measure certain things and to get the relationships accurate within your photo. I'm a big advocate of just using a reference photo barely at all. I don't like to, be stuck looking at the reference photo over and over and over, because then all you're doing is being a copier and you're just copying what you see on the image. What you want to do is take the photo and just take the essence of the photo and make that a painting. So we're not trying to do a photo, we're trying to do a painting. So that's really important. But getting accurate proportions is also very important to make your paintings look believable or accurate. So what I'm going to do is show you my setup. Like I said, I've got an 11 by 14 inch canvas here. I'm just going to change the camera angle around so you can see how I work from a reference photo. Okay, so I got to kind of lean into the camera angle here a little bit, but I'm going to lean back out so I can show you everything too. So I've got my canvas set up here. Since I'm right-handed, it's easier for me to look to the left. I'm not sure if that's a thing really, but I'm more comfortable being right-handed, looking to the left and drawing rather than crossing over my arm and drawing this way. It's whatever is comfortable for you. If you are right-handed and like looking that way, it doesn't matter. It's just how I do it. But as you can see here, I've got my screen, which is hooked up to my laptop. So I'll just bring up a picture on my laptop, bring it up on this bigger screen here, and I've got my canvas here, and I look over here to reference the photo. If you have an iPod or an iPad or a tablet of any kind or a laptop, you can put that over here. You don't have to have a screen. You can, do whatever works for you. And just to have something there, you can print out a picture and put it over here or up above the canvas. Doesn't matter. Just wanted to show you my setup. So this is my setup, and I'm going to switch now and start talking about how I create my initial sketch. Okay, I'm going to have the image come up over here somewhere, and once that comes up, we'll get started. And I'm sure it just magically appeared there. Okay, what I'm going to do is talk about how I measure things. First thing I do, especially with an image like this, where it's really just some rocks down here and some trees, it's kind of simple. What I like to do is determine how high the rocks come up. And since I've cropped my image to an 11 by 14, and this is an 11 by 14, it's really easy. So let's say this is about halfway through the canvas right here. I know the rocks don't go up that high. What I try to do is I don't draw a line here, but you can. I visualize where halfway through the canvas is, and then I try to visualize how far down those rocks start. So if halfway is about here, I know the rocks start just below the halfway mark and have a downward angle to the right. So what I would do initially is just kind of draw a line across like that. And once you have that first line in there, you can kind of look to see how accurate it is. So you want to kind of measure. I actually drew it a little bit too high. So if you made a mistake like that, all you have to do is just move it down. Now that you have a reference point, and move it down a little bit. Okay, so that's a lot more accurate. What I do next is kind of see where the trees might be. And I know there's a big space right here. So I don't want to make the trees too tall. They probably come right around here. Okay, so, and like I said, I'm not doing any details, I'm just drawing in elements. So then I've got more trees over here. And what I like to do is measure this negative space. Okay, so what I do is I know this tree, next tree comes up and it's a couple inches from the top, but it's not way down here. So like I said before, it's okay to make things a little bit taller than shorter. You don't want to get too shrunk. But I'm just using a 6B pencil, by the way. Okay, so I'm just scribbling in the shapes of these trees. Okay, no big deal. No detail really. So I've got this negative space here, and I can look at this shape and see that I've made a nice accurate proportion due to this shape. If I were to draw this tree way up here and I looked over at my reference photo, which is over here somewhere, you'd know that this much space is not right. You know, it's a lot bigger than that. So I try to find, you know, where the top of the canvas is and where the image stops and measure that space in my mind or in my head and say, okay, I know I can't bring the tree up here because that's too tall, and if I put it way down here, that's way too short. So that's kind of how I measure things. It sounds kind of complicated and a little jumbled, I guess, but by looking at your negative space, you can measure to make sure things are tall enough, wide enough, whatever. So that's another thing. You know, you can look at these negative spaces and measure the distance between trees. You know that there's not a huge gap here. You know, it's pretty narrow, but the trees aren't touching. So you got to think about all those little things while you're drawing. So this next tree comes up and it's about a ½ inch or an inch from the top. Okay, so I've got this first few trees up here. Then we've got, this tree's a little bit wider. See, I can recognize areas that need to be changed a little bit by looking at the negative space between objects. I know this space is going to be narrow here, and this tree, next tree, takes up about, you know, this is the halfway point. The halfway point is about where that space is. So that's how I know to bring this tree out a little bit further, because that halfway point is right about here. And then that next tree starts on the other half of that halfway point. So this tree should be a little bit wider in some areas, but like I said, I'm not going to fuss about details. So okay, so this is the halfway point right through here. The other tree starts right about on that mark. And it goes up and goes right to the tippy top and just about touches that edge. So again, what I'm looking for a relationship is the space between this tree, what kind of shape does it make, where's that halfway point, and where do things start? Do things start beyond the halfway point and then cross over it? Do they start right on the halfway point, or do they start a little bit past the halfway point? Those are all questions I ask myself while I'm drawing. So normally I would probably take a little more time drawing, but I'm just kind of scribbling in shapes so you can get the idea. So if you look at these negative spaces now, this shape here, that's kind of accurate, but it looks a little too big. So what I'd do is extend this little piece and this little piece, and then I just made it a little more accurate. Because this space was too open, some of these branches go up into that space. And that's another thing you need to recognize is what shape does this negative space make? Is it a square? Is it a square with a little piece coming off? This is a square. Where do the pieces go in? So lots of different reference points you can ask yourself. Okay, I'm not going to worry about those little trees down there in the distance. Okay, so now I've got my trees in there. Pretty happy with that. So the next point would be to draw in some of the shadows for the rocks. Okay, for this rock over here, the shadow starts, you want to look at your angle. I mean, does the shadow go this way? Does it go that way? Does it go kind of vertical? This one's kind of vertical at a little bit of an angle going to the right. It starts a little bit left of the canvas. There's about ½ inch of space there. But it comes out, and how far does it come up to this line? Now I'm referencing this line right here. And I want to know, how high up does this go? Well, it goes up to about 1.5 inches away. Okay, and then, so it's got about a ½ inch shadow here. Then another piece that comes up. Okay, and this shadow right here comes out a little bit. And then another shadow right through here. And so those all kind of reach just about the halfway point right here. Then we have this little rock and some of these spaces crossing over the halfway point, and that's what I'm looking for. We've got the halfway point right about here. When I want to look for all those little shadows that are happening on that halfway point. Okay, and then there's lots of little things going on here that I'll paint later. But what I'm trying to do is get a good reference photo. Okay, then we have right directly above these shadows a rock. This big kind of flat rock that's balancing on stuff. Okay, and the edge of this rock almost lines up with these shadows over here. And the other edge lines up with just about the halfway point. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Is I'm measuring where my shadows, how wide are they? Do they reach the halfway point? Where do they reference to the edge of the canvas? This line here, this shadow, starts about ½ inch or 1/4 inch from the edge. These shadows start a few inches from this shadow, and they extend to about halfway through the canvas. All of those types of things I'm thinking about when I'm drawing my initial sketch. Okay, and once we have some lead on there, what we can do is take a brush with some water. And we can actually just brush over the lead. And we can kind of blend some of the lead together a little bit so it's not just scribbles. Okay, and then I'll do the same for these shadows. You can make some adjustments here too when you're brushing in the lead. Okay, so to recap, when we're setting up this background drawing, you want to determine relationships. And there's 3 major relationships. To the edges of the canvas, that's 1. To the midpoints of the canvas, that's 2. And then to the relationships between objects, that's the 3rd one. So I think it's easiest to find a midpoint and something that's close to the midpoint, and then draw that first line. And then you want to build relationships based on that line and the midpoint. Once you start spreading out through the canvas, then you want to start looking at relationships to the edges of the canvas too. If you crop your picture to the same size your canvas is, it's going to help you a lot in finding those relationships. Because when you're looking at the reference photo, it's the same size, so you can look at this negative space and mimic that from your reference photo. So it's a lot to take in, and it's something you'll have to practice and you have to be conscious of when you're doing it. But with practice, you'll get some nice, accurate initial drawings that you can work from. And they don't have to be perfect. Painting is a process. We adjust, we fiddle with things. But if you have the initial relationships kind of accurate, you'll have a much more accurate final product. If you have any questions, you can visit my website at www.timgagnon.com. Have a large variety of online painting lessons that suit everyone. We've got animals, landscapes, portraits, you name it, it's on there. So if you're interested in taking some online painting lessons, head on over to my website and try some of those out. I also do a large variety of in-person workshops around the country. So if you're interested in taking some painting lessons in person, they're a lot of fun. It's a 2-day workshop. We do a painting from start to finish, and I do a lot of one-on-one help with everyone. So if you're interested in that, go on over to timgagnon.com and check those out too. And as always, if you found this video helpful, please feel free to share it with all your friends. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.